We're very excited and grateful to have Hakima Grafer with us today. Hakima Debbie Grafer graduated from the University of Spiritual Healing and Sufism in 2004. She's a community leader of the San Diego Sufi community and was given the rank of Muqaddam Murrabi, which is a community leader and teacher by Sidi Muhammad Jamal of Jerusalem. She hosted the Shaykh for a number of years when he taught in the Southern California area. Heeding the guidance of the Shaykh, she traveled to study with his daughter-in-law, Fawzia al-Rawi, in Austria, Morocco, and Jerusalem. She has had a continuing deep connection to Sidi through her personal experience with him, his talks, and his writings. Her teaching today is Falling in Love with the Prophet. Hakima, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So we start as our guide always started. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah. Muhammadan Rasulullah. Ibrahim Rasulullah. Musa Rasulullah. Isa Rasulullah. Alayhim salatu Allah. Today is a very holy day. These were the words our Sheikh started almost every meeting with, as I recall, and I always wondered what those were. At first I thought it was a special day in one of the holy months of Islam or whatever, but he did it so often I thought, oh my God, maybe every day is just holy to him. And now, of course, today, the day of his passing, feels like a very holy day. We remember it always. And also in our missing him and the time that we spent with him and what we received from him, I realized that every day that he started his lecture like that was, for all of us, some of the most holiest days of our lives. So he was right. Well, of course he was right, but that's my understanding now is, oh my God, yes, those were very holy days. So today is a holy day. I remember when Sidi al-Jamal used to come from Jerusalem, and I would go to sit with him at the Welcome Weekend up in Northern California. And I had been doing all my practices during the year, and I was doing dhikrs and writing his books and reading his books. And yet, when I sat in that room, even though I had felt connected throughout the year, when I sat in that room with him and he began to speak, tears would fill my eyes and I would be weeping and I would feel, oh my God, I had no idea I was so thirsty. And he used to call it the water of the truth. And those of us who have experienced it know what that is. So in speaking about the Prophet, alayhi salam, which I know Sidi would be very happy to have his holy day, the day that we're remembering him, be spent speaking about the Prophet because he was his beloved. And there is something that I have found in the Ocean of Mercy, which speaks to the water, which I want to read. He said, Allah likened his beloved one, Muhammad, to water coming down in measure from heaven. For water is that which gives life to all things. And isn't that what we felt in the presence of our guide? In like manner, the light of Muhammad, prayers and peace be upon him, is the life of every heart. And his being in existence is the mercy to everything. Allah has made it clear how people can benefit by his light and made a sign of what he bestows upon them from the blessedness of Muhammad by using the word valleys. He says in the Quran, he sends water down out of the heavens and the valleys flow, each according to its measure. And he made, in another place he says, he made heart's valleys, some great, some small, some glorious and some humble. And he has made each heart to carry water to the measure of its width and size, sending the floods to it, and having taught all peoples their own drinking places. My introduction to Muhammad, alayhi salam, was reading the books and writing the books. And every time I came to the word Muhammad, I skipped over it. It's like, I don't know who that is. I know nothing about him. But I didn't feel the need to go and find out. I was being so fed by music of the soul that I really didn't care. I was just drinking and drinking, and it was like, oh, I'll get to that later. And maybe some of you are there. So my first introduction to the Quran was in my second month of finding this. And I opened the Quran. I was up at the land. And of course, I opened it to one of those 3 or 4 statements that triggers everybody. And I immediately closed it. So that was my first experience. A couple of years later, I decided that I should try to read it. And I opened it up and I got through, I don't know, maybe the second surah, maybe not. That's the long Baqarah. And at a certain point, I closed it and said, I don't think this is for me. And then a year later, during Ramadan, I thought, well, I have to do it. I really have to read this as recommended every day. And I got a third of the way through it, and I got stopped again. I got blocked. It's like, oh my God, if I have to listen to the same story over and over again, it's all about Moses and all of these things. It felt very repetitive, and it was always about the hypocrites. And so I decided to put it down and to pick up the book about Muhammad and find out who is Muhammad anyway. So the first book that I found is this one. And by the way, it comes in a dark green in case you think you have the wrong one. This is by Martin Lings. I read this book and I fell in love with the Prophet, alayhi salam. And after that, I found the Quran to be completely different. It gave me a completely new understanding. And by the way, my favorite Quran is this one. This was recommended by Fawzia. It's written by an Austrian who became a Muslim and lived in Mecca for many years. And he's so full of the wisdom. It's so beautiful. And just to let you know, there are 3 different types out there. This is an old one from 1980, which is my favorite. The newest one you'll find online, which is gray. I wouldn't even lift up here. It's too heavy to hold. But you can get the same one in 6 volumes. It's very beautiful and will explain so many of the things, the triggers that come up as you're reading it. And in that light, I remember sitting at the lake house long before I ever tried to read the Quran, and one of the beloveds there said to Sidi, something that I read in the Quran, it really hurts my heart. So did he explain it to her? Did he edify? Did he, was he going to give it to us? He didn't answer her. What he said was, my love, if you feel that way, you're not yet ready to understand. And he left us to do our own discovery. And there's a verse in Waqia that says, truly this is a noble recital in a book well hidden, which no one can touch but the pure. What does that mean? You have to wash before you pick it up? Have a bath, have a shower? It has to do with the layers. I mean, you can pick it up, and as I did the first time, and I read something that triggered me. I was seeing the outside and nothing deeper than that. But Sidi says there's at least 7 layers to everything. It goes deeper every time you read it. And this is what the purity is. It's like the more that this is part of what we're doing and why we're doing it, as we do our morning washing at the watering hole, as we do dhikr, as we do salat. All these things that we're doing are cleaning us and connecting us to where we have more of a connection, but a deeper ability to see the underlying truths. So this is what happens as you read over and over again. So this book, Muhammad, I read a book of Muhammad every year. And this one I have read probably 6 times to every one of Ocean of the Mercy. And I'm not going to lift, oh, yes, I will. I have it marked. The Ocean of the Mercy, which many of you know, one of Sidi's beloveds wrote with his blessing. And so I decided I read it every month just before Ramadan. Gets me in the space to be ready for reading the Quran so intensely. I really want to share with you my love of these books if you get nothing else from this. Because it gives you so much more. In the beginning, it was like, oh, so that's who Muhammad was. He was very beautiful. And that's why he says this in the Quran. That's why this was given. It gives you an understanding of the time period and what was happening in the life of the community of the Prophet and in the life of the Prophet, why these things came down. But where it really opened up for me was the year when I was thinking, oh my God, all about these hypocrites. When I realized suddenly, oh, actually he's talking to me and my own hypocrisy. And that is when the Quran begins to become alive for you, is when you see it as pertaining to you and not those other people, not those other hypocrites, not those people who are being unfaithful and all these things. It's really about the life of the human being, and it is our walk from being caught in our nafs, in our ego, in our animalistic nature, and it's our journey to becoming the perfect human being, inshallah, becoming the most perfect human being that we can. And it's a cleaning process, it's a reflective process, it's a beautiful process. And what better way to do that than to take examples of those who went before us and Muhammad, who was the most perfect. Oh, Allah. So I want to read a couple of things. Actually, this is from the deeper meaning behind the Pillars of Islam. In the very, very back of the book, the last 2 pages, Sidi talks about the Prophet, alayhi salam. Uh-oh, lost my glasses. So in terms of visiting the Prophet, he's talking about the Hajj or the pilgrimage. And he says, know, my beloved, that when the knower reaches to whatever he has reached, and has not entered this presence of Muhammad to travel in it, according to his politeness, until its lights shine upon him, one may be concerned for him, because he has reached without going through this station. Therefore, it is necessary for him to return to it, for which it is said, the reality of the end is the return to the beginning. And it has been said, how can anyone who loves not love the Prophet, nor give his attention to him? For he is the door to Allah, and entering to Allah can only be through his door. And actually what I'm doing is trying to give you a few reasons. Like the first thing is, well, why do we want to love the Prophet? We're doing really well with enjoying our guide and all these other things that we have to walk with, and we certainly have a lot to do. So the first is the why. Why do we want to love the Prophet? Because Muhammad, the messenger of Allah, joins the 2 seas, between them a barrier which they do not cross. These are 2 opposites that do not meet, meaning what is a happening and is transient and ephemeral cannot meet with the eternal. But Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, is the barrier, the barzakh, between the 2 boundaries, the land of the 2 seas, having 2 sides and faces. He is the intermediary. As for his revealed face, he is a spot in the soil. That is his body or his presence. And as for his hidden face, he is a vice-regent of the Lord of all the worlds. So it is said, Muhammadan Rasulullah. And by that, you can reach the whole meaning and its order. If you take away the word messenger, the meaning is changed, so that when what is ephemeral, Muhammad, who's temporal, meets with what is eternal, which is Allah, then what is ephemeral and transient disappears, and only the eternal remains. Because you say, Muhammad Allah. So the pillar of this meaning becomes the source upon which you learn and which does not need any link, and this is the meaning of Allah's revelation. But it is not possible to be in the deep politeness of these presences except through the word Muhammadan Rasulullah. So this is a short explanation of how the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam is the intermediary and how everything is seen in this world, that he is the manifestation of Allah. So it is also said that knowing Allah without any form is not possible. So then what form are we going to use to know Allah? It is also said you will not be a believer or attain to faith until the Prophet alayhi salam is dearer to you than your own soul. And Allah said, say Muhammad, if you love Allah, follow me and Allah will love you. And the fortune of every creature is in proportion to its nearness to him. And the Prophet alayhi salam said, praise me not as the Christians praise Jesus. See, I am the slave of Allah and his messenger. When he was asked, who are the family of Muhammad who we are called upon to love and honor and treat with respect? He said, the people who listen and fulfill their duties, whoever believes in me and is true to me. And then he was asked, and by what signs may they be known? And he said, their preference of love for me over all other love, inward occupation with my remembrance, second only to the remembrance of Allah. So these are the whys, and then we come to the whos. So I feel that one of the best ways to know who the Prophet was, I mean, there are descriptions of him and his gentleness and his qualities and his how he took the middle road and was in between things and never loud and always trustworthy. In fact, trustworthy is a really big one. He was called Al-Amin, which means the trustworthy. And he was so trustworthy that even when the whole of Medina was against him, and they were torturing his followers, and they were starving them, certainly mistreating them all, and they plotted to kill the Prophet. But even in all of that, all the people who were against him still had him keep their treasures. When he migrated to Medina and left, he had to leave Ali behind to give away all of people's belongings that he had in safekeeping. So even when they turned against him, they didn't ask him to give their stuff back. It's like, we know that he'll keep it safe. He was very generous. He was very bold. He was most truthful, and he was the gentlest. And he carried a light in his face. It was said that when someone dropped a needle in the dark, by him bending down, the needle could be found from the light in his face. And he carried a fragrance with him. Do you remember the story of Ibrahim, that he came to visit his son's wife? He wasn't home, and when he came back, he realized his father had been there because he smelled his fragrance. The same was true for the Prophet. He carried a very beautiful fragrance. And I like the story. This is some of the things you get from reading his books. There's a story of a blind man who came to the Prophet, wanted to ask him some questions, but he was very busy and he was talking to some of the important people of the town, trying to convince them of his message. And the blind man kept interrupting and wanting his attention. And finally, the important people left, and he turned around exasperated and walked away. And then he got a revelation from Allah that basically said he frowned and turned away, and that perhaps those people whose hearts were closed would never hear his message, and yet someone who was asking for it, he turned away. And from then on, the Prophet referred to him as he who, because of him, Allah chastised me. And he treated him with the utmost respect. And you know how if we're chastised, we're ashamed of it and we want to cover it up. Well, the lesson for me in this was that he didn't cover it up. He acknowledged it and he spoke about it. And he was grateful to this man that he learned something through Allah from him. The tree. So there was a tree that was next to the mosque, and when they first moved to Medina, and he used to speak to his people from standing under this tree. And when the mosque was finished and he moved over there to give the talks, the tree groaned. And the Prophet explained, yes, the tree is sad that I am not speaking, that I'm not underneath him and taking his protection from the sun. All of these things are so touching. It shows us how deep the unseen is and how deep the Prophet was in his connection. And reading the books of Muhammad, so there's more that comes than just the life of the Prophet, is what I'm saying. By rereading it every time, it opens up new things. And I would say that the main thing that I feel I get by rereading it can be summed up in this verse or in this statement. It is Allah's hand that is the source of all actions and every outcome. Now, you know how this goes with the teachings. Oh yeah, I knew that. We know that. We don't always realize it. We don't always actualize it. We eventually get there. There's something about reading this book over and over again and the things that happen that you would think, don't we sometimes think, what am I doing wrong? That things aren't happening right? I mean, things were so difficult with the Prophet's people and during their time and with the battles that they were fighting to preserve their lives and their property and themselves, their religion. That when they lost a battle, it was easy for people on the outside to say, Allah wasn't with you. And yet they learned to see how Allah helped them through that. And he helped them more from the failure. So the first time you read it, you see, okay, so, Allah didn't give them victory. He gave them victory when they were outnumbered. And then when they were not outnumbered, he didn't give them victory. When they should have won, they didn't. So it's all the lessons. Everything that happened was a lesson. And the Prophet helped them all to see it. And then what the companions do and how they respond and the love they had for him has to open your heart. It can't, and it shows you who the Prophet was, because we are not sitting beside him. We are not living next to him. We can only see how the people who were with him responded. Now, in that, I'm going to read something from Martin Ling's book. But I want to say that the biggest difference for me between the two books is, like, why do I read this one like 6 times and The Ocean of Mercy once? And then, The Ocean of Mercy is really beautiful and it has a lot of esoteric things that this book doesn't. This is basically the book, the life of the Prophet, alayhi salam. But there are some places that are written so sweetly that it really opens my heart. It's it's quicker to get through. You just read it, you can't put it down, it's engaging. And The Ocean of the Mercy has a lot of references from Ibn Arabi. and explanations, which are also exquisite. So it's just different. But there's one explanation that I prefer in this book, which is a story of two of his men who were captured and taken by the Quraysh and were executed. So they say to him, revert from Islam and we will let you go free. I would not revert from Islam, he said, if by doing so I could have all that is on earth. And do you not wish that Muhammad were here in thy place? They said, and that you were sitting in thy home? And he said, I would not want one hair of Muhammad to be hurt, that I get to go free. And they tried to convince him. They persisted in saying, if you do not, we will surely slay thee. And he said, my being slain for God is but a trifle if I die in him. So then he said, then he spoke to Allah, this man who was being killed, and he said, O God, no man is here who will take thy messenger my greeting of peace. So take him thou my greeting of peace. Now the prophet was sitting with Zayd and others of the companions in Medina, and there came over him a state, even as when the revelation descended upon him, and they heard him say, and on thee be peace and the mercy of God. Then he said to his companions, this is Jibril, who greeteth me with peace from Kubayb. So then he had a very ugly death. And then the second captive they killed as well, and he responded in the same way. And when he was put to death, the main Quraysh who was seeking revenge said, no father so loveth his son as the companions of Muhammad love Muhammad. This was said from his enemy, his arch enemy. Allah. I feel that for those of you who haven't met Sidi, that one of the best ways for you to get to know him is through the love of his students and their stories of him, their memories of him, if nothing else, just their love for him. And I can say too that one of the best ways to connect with him, and this goes also for all of us who are missing him, is it's not necessary to miss him. That if you really want to connect with him, do what he asked, write his books. It's the most exquisite thing. In my early days of writing the books, I used to wait for people to leave. It's like, when is the dhikr going to be over? I want to go write my books. It was such a sweet connection. And when I was up at the land and hadn't met Sidi yet, I was writing the books. And Nada said to me, you need to call Sidi in Jerusalem. I said, I don't want to call this guy I don't know. And she repeated it, 3 times during the time I was there. And she kept saying, you need to call Sidi. I said, who is this guy in Jerusalem? I don't want to call some Middle Eastern man I've never met. And suddenly what hit me was, oh my God, he's the author. He's the author of these books that I'm in love with. And I called Sidi. And, those are things you never forget. What I said to him, how he responded to me, those are all personal things and they're exquisite. But when you explain it to someone, you don't have to give all the details. The love comes through, just as the love of the companions came through for the Prophet alayhi salam. So, the Prophet had a persona, he had a physical presence, and then he had what we call the Muhammadan light or the Muhammadan outpouring. And that's an explanation which is actually very deep. And I can give references to that if you want to read more deeply on it. But people don't understand really when we're talking about the Prophet. There's a prophet that is, so if we're talking about who is the Prophet and who was the Prophet, when we talk about who was the Prophet, it was the being. And who is the Prophet is the Muhammadan outpouring, that intermediary, the mercy that remains. So there is a story that the angel Jabril said to the prophet, he said, you know, there was a star that always was always behind the throne of Allah. And every time a prophet went to the earth, that star went with him. And when he passed away, the star returned. And he said, and when you went to earth, the star disappeared. It went with you, but it has never returned. And the Prophet, alayhi salam, said, that is because the star is the mercy. And even though my body is gone, the mercy remains. And this is the saying of Allah's mercy, that the Prophet was a mercy for all humankind. So, yes, if anybody wants those references of where to find them, I can give them to you. In the meantime, I'm just going to talk about ways to fall in love with the Prophet. And I think you got the first one. Read his book. Read the book about the life of the Prophet, alayhi salam. My suggestion is you read Muhammad by Martin Lings first, and then you read The Ocean of Mercy, or if you have just The Ocean of Mercy, read that one. And then read it every year. Read it at least once a year. Before Ramadan is a great time to do it. Or if you're not reading Quran, if you happen to be rather new and not reading Quran during Ramadan, then read the life of Muhammad. And my second recommendation is to write it, to sit down and write it. Now, if you've never written Sidi's books, if you've never written one book all the way through, you're missing the teachings, really. If you have a broken wrist, okay, you have an excuse not to write. And I only heard Sidi, and of course I wasn't always with him, but I only heard Sidi once give someone permission not to write his books, and that was when the person was dyslexic. And it was so hard for her to read that she never got what she was getting from it anyway, you know. So, and then I've also had people tell me that they just didn't like it. And when I sat down and figured out why, it's like they were sitting down with a pen and paper and starting to write. They never read it, right? So it's kind of like if you take a newspaper and you start to write what you're reading, you don't necessarily get it. You have to do it in a way where you're understanding. And it's not about the transmission. I mean, it is and it isn't, but people sometimes say, oh, I figure I'm getting it through the transmission. If you're not understanding it, he was very clear about that. He said, read and understand. Read, write, and understand. And then he'd say, read, write, understand, and then apply it, right? So you have to sit and read the paragraph or the section about something. And then you go back and you read the first few lines. And then you stop and you read the first line and then you begin to write. Right? You take the phrase and you write. Because if you don't do that, it is nonsense. It's just one word after another without meaning. So that's that. If you're not enjoying it, that's probably why. The other thing that I would suggest is give it 40 days. Write for half an hour, give a commitment, a promise to Allah, and write for 40 days. And take a book and start with it and do it that way. And it doesn't matter whether you do it in the morning or the evening, if you do it both times, but at least 30 minutes. And honestly, you're welcome to call me if you do that 40-day trial and you still don't like it, call me up and we'll think of something. Wazifa. So the wazifa is a prayer on the Prophet, but it's so much deeper than it's not just like sending prayers on the Prophet, although it is. First of all, Allah says that when you send prayers ask for peace and blessings upon the Prophet, what you're really asking for is the revealing and the unveiling. So this is the Allahummas, right? Oh Allah, send blessings and peace on your Prophet Muhammad and on his family. First of all, we're the family. We're trying to be the family. And it is said that every time we send peace and blessings on the Prophet, alayhi salam, he is sent back into his tomb to return the blessings, and that Allah gives them back tenfold. So that helps with the walking, of course. But in reality, we're asking for the revealing. And the Prophet is the supreme veil. So If you read Wazifa, which Sidi recommended, he said, read Wazifa daily. I recommend reading, if you're reading transliteration, trying to learn the Arabic, at least read the English once a week, because otherwise it becomes rote and it just becomes Arabic. And yes, there is a transmission and it sounds very beautiful, just like recitation of Quran, but he was always clear, understand it. So what he said to me was, read it in English, learn the transliteration and read it that way. So you're reading the Arabic and you're reading the English at the same time. Well, that doesn't always go well for people. It works well when you have two people. Rahima and I used to sit here every day and we would do this every morning at 6:30. And what we do is we take turns. One of us would read the Arabic and the other would read the English. And then the next day we'd switch. And we got so that we knew how to slow down for the other language. So we would finish at the same time. And you begin to absorb that way what the meaning is because you're hearing them both at the same time. So that's a suggestion. The wazifa is more than just blessings on the Prophet. It's like drown me in the source of the seas of oneness, and till I do not see and I do not hear and I do not feel except through it. It's asking for what we're walking for. It's what we're all here for the love, for the mercy, for the witnessing, for the unveiling. This is a prayer asking for that, which is, I'm sure, why Sidi asked us to read that every day, because it's a prayer asking to receive these things that we want. And it's a blessed prayer. It's something that I'm sure was direct transmission to from Allah to Mashish, Ibn Mashish, and passed down through Shadali. And it is the Shadali way. We are Shadali. This is the Shadali way. And if we want to be walking, this is a very good way to walk. There are so many things to do, of course, that if you had all day, you could be doing them all. So I like to choose things. I did Wazifa for many years and didn't miss it. And then I began to spend more time with other things. So I go back and forth. So for example, reading the whole Ramadan readings book with Yasin and Waqi and all of those, and Hisbul Bahar. There are so many things. But if you asked Sidi, and Fawzia once said to me, if you don't want to know, don't ask, right? So Sidi, what should I write? Oh, write this, 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 and this. So if you were to write all of those things, if you don't want to know that you need to write them all, don't ask him. So you'll hear from other people that he told them, never miss Waqia, never miss Wazifa, never miss Yasin, right? So if he didn't tell you that, he didn't tell you that, right? So if you listen to everything he told everybody. So he told me, one of the first things he told me that first day I called him, he said, get up in the night and spend 30 minutes talking to Allah. Well, of course, then Ibrahim said you need to spend an hour and then you have to do salat and then you have to do this. I mean, I go back to that first thing, 30 minutes in the night, right? So half an hour before Fajr to me is the night, and that works, right? That's doable for me rather than, yes, you need to get up and spend 2 hours from 3 to 5 or whatever, It's kind of like, the way the Prophet said when they did the Hajj the last time, and he said, Allah has completed your religion for you. One of the companions said, "Oh Prophet, are we supposed to do this every year?" And he didn't answer. And he asked him a second time, and he didn't answer. And he asked a third time, and he didn't answer. And then after a while, he came back and he said, "Oh, so-and-so, if I had answered you that, it would have become incumbent upon you and it would have been difficult." So basically, we need to go once, right? So it's kind of the way I feel about the teachings too, is don't make it difficult, make it sweet. And if something becomes old and you're in rote, then do something else, which is why I like to go from one Muhammad book to another. And then again, read the message of the Quran. Yeah. With all the footnotes. The footnotes are the best. So Fawzia recommended this, and one time when we were in Jerusalem and she had my daughter, she told her to write Baqarah, and not to write it. She told her to read it and to read all the footnotes with it. And it was just the most beautiful opening. So if that's where you want to start, do that. So I read it during Ramadan, and then I figured out the book that I have is 99 pages, whatever, 999 pages. So it's 3 pages a day. So I try to get through the Quran another time by reading 3 pages with the footnotes. And that works too. Another way to get close to the Prophet is to increase your Allahumas, right? The blessings on the Prophet. So if the wazifa is too long for you, then you do your 100 Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And knowing that you're asking for the unveiling and the witnessing as you do that. So the other thing that I recommend is that you, within the Music of the Soul, there is a 100-page explanation that our guide Sidi wrote about the wazifa. Now, those who went to the school were asked to write that during the 2nd year. Some did, some didn't, is the way it always is. I can assure you, if you do that, it will change you. And I realized by that this is the same with everything. All of these spiritual things that are full of the water of the truth, they can't help but change you. You can't be wasting your time. You're kind of wasting your time if you do it half-heartedly, but if you really put yourself into it and you apply yourself, see these words, apply, then what you'll get is the water of the truth. You will be fed, you will be nourished, your thirst will be quenched. And you will just have desire, more and more desire to keep going. I'll tell you something that was very interesting about that. The time that we were told to read and write the explanation of the wazifa was over the Christmas holidays. And before I came back to school, I went to a Toastmasters meeting, which I hadn't been to for a while. And as I was standing up, going out the door, and I suddenly realized, it's right after New Year's. They're going to ask people to talk about their goals. Well, this was one of the first years I didn't write any because I didn't care, right? Dunya. So I sat down and I wrote out 3 things. I just jotted them. I didn't sit. I stood on my way out the door and I wrote 3 things. And I got there, and sure enough, they asked me my goals, and I stated these things. This is what I want. When I got back to school, Salima and AR were teaching, and AR said, we know who of you read this and who of you didn't. I mean, which of you, whom of you, who wrote and who didn't? Because there's a difference in you. It changes you. And then he proceeded to outline those 3 things I had written down. Now, I actually don't remember the 3rd one. The first one that I said was, one of my goals is to not try and put everything in a box. And the second thing I said is to be comfortable not understanding. And that is, of course, one of the big things of Sufism is increase me in perplexity of you. And in the wazifa, there's a line that says, and each one's inability to understand suffices him. So we understand to the degree that we can, and it's enough. And then as we can understand more, we get more. And this is the way Allah walks us. I have to call AR and find out what that 3rd thing was. No, actually, I need to write it again. So if anybody wants to make a pact with me, my next plan, once I've done with the book I'm writing right now, is to write the wazifa again. That might be a fun project for us. And for those of you who want some support in writing, Abdul Qadir Davies right now is starting the book, the Imagination book, Reality of Imagination, if you'd like to write that with the community. So the other thing that I would like to recommend is probably the most important, which is to ask Allah, to do dua, to ask him for help. Is if you want to love the Prophet, is, oh Allah, Increase me in understanding, increase me in knowledge of the Prophet. How can you possibly love someone you don't know? The more you know someone, and especially someone who is so worthy, how can you not fall in love with him? Ask Allah, He will open it. Increase me in love of your Prophet until I die for him to myself, that I may live the true meaning of life through his secret. Okay. So there is something else that I was looking for the last couple of weeks in the music of the soul and couldn't find it. And this morning I was picking my music of the soul to bring it into this room, and it opened to it. So we get it. So this chapter, the reason I couldn't find it is I was looking for a chapter that I thought should be called Fana fi Shaykh, but it's actually called the True Murid. So I'm going to read quite a bit of this, and this is about making the Fana through the Shaykh and through the Prophet alayhi salam. You need to return, beloved. You want to fly. I am the holy rock. Put all that you are inside of me to stand on this rock. It will carry you. Now, I need to say what Sidi always said. Listen with the ears of your heart. I want to hold you, not in my arms, but in my ascension, al-Miraj. Travel with me through the 7 earths and the 7 heavens. In the midst of the heavens is the holy throne. If you want to sit on that throne and fly in that sky, you must ascend beyond all that you have experienced and known. Beloved, I want you to be the eye of my witnessing, to kill yourself in me, to drown in the depth of the ocean, and to not return again to the surface. When you drown in me, you begin to fly in me, and to make your ascent in every sky. And in every sky, Allah gives you a new soul, soul after soul. You travel through the stations of all the prophets until you meet face to face with the soul of your Father in the light. To reach the highest plane, in which the soul of the Prophet within you returns to its origin in the light of God, you must stand on the holy rock of guidance, which is the presence of the guide and the form of the path, the tariqah, upon which the follower offers up his life, and then plunges into the ocean of the soul of the guide and the path which is beneath the form of the rock. When the student has plunged, the guide sees him immersed in the sea, and the ocean is churning. In the midst of the sea, the student is weeping tears of light and beginning to consume himself. The sea is like fire, and the guide pours the oil of his love and wisdom into it. And the winds of the love of Allah move across the waters, making the sea of fire more and more strong. The student in his station is like a woman in the last days who wants to give birth and needs help. Then the guide puts his oil in the fire to make him mad with a deep secret knowing. And in this moment, when he is in the garden of the deep secret love, he eats himself. Then he looks around, and there is nothing. And he finds himself flying inside his guide, and everything has changed. His guide has given him new clothes of light and gives birth to him again from the heart of his soul. This is what I mean about the Miraj. He makes this ascension in the 7 heavens of the heart of the soul of his guide. This is called al-Fana fi Shaykh. And as the student is annihilated in his Shaykh, the Shaykh is also annihilated in the flight of his student. When the student looks to see himself, he has no presence, no body. All he can see is his Shaykh. The student listens and the language of speaking stops. He speaks with himself alone, not with his tongue, but with the tongue of his soul. He weeps, and this weeping is deeper than love, deeper than knowing, deeper than praying. This is like the weeping of Adam when Eve left him to be born herself, or like Elijah. The student sees his master rising into the sky of God's grace. The student is standing on a rock, the holy rock, as Elijah the ever-living ascends in a flashing chariot. The rock on which he is standing is the teaching, the ground upon which his master stood. Then, as the chariot rises, the last gesture of Elijah before he returns to the source is to drop his mantle to his student. The work of the student is to receive the mantle, the transmission of the way from his guide as his guide ascends to God. You only truly know your guide when you see him return to God with your own eyes. But he does not leave you empty-handed. He leaves you with his mantle, the path, the tariqah, and the way to follow him and to drink from his cup. This is like a passage down a long corridor, doorway within doorway of annihilation in love. The murid walks through the heart of the Shaykh into the heart of the Prophet. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. And into the heart of his beloved Allah. That is, when he is annihilated in his Shaykh, he finds that his Shaykh does not exist but for the existence of the Prophet. And then he is himself annihilated in the presence of the Prophet to see that in the existence of the Prophet, there is no reality but the reality of Allah. And something Sidi says in the ocean, in the music of the soul, he says, and this is for those of us who miss his presence. He says, I remain with you, my friend, for all I have said to you is a part of myself. I remain with you, my friend, for all I have said to you is a part of myself. He has given himself to us through his words, through his essence, and certainly through his writings, which are full of himself. And the last one that I suggest is to repeat your bayat daily. So, of course, the beautiful bayat that was taken by the companions, actually the helpers under the tree at Aqaba. They put their hand over the hand of the Prophet, alayhi salam, and they made a promise to him. And Sidi, our guide, asked us to make that promise. And when he came every year, he asked us to renew that promise. And why not do it yourself? Imagine yourself in Sidi's presence with your hand over his hand. Because as the Prophet said, or what Allah said to the Prophet, when they place their hand on your hand, it is the hand of Allah over yours. And they are really taking the bayah with Allah. I promise Allah to be one of his children, to walk straight, the Sufi way, to give the peace, to give the mercy, the justice and the freedom all my life. Amen. So, thank you. I'm not sure if we have any questions or if we have time for questions, Abdullah.
Sure, we have a few minutes if anybody has a question or if they'd like to respond to Hakima. Unmute your microphone, or if you're on a cell phone, just hit *6.
Hakima?
Yes.
There's a wonderful book that I don't know if you've heard about it or not, but I heard about it from my friend Sarah Sue Madonna. It's a 2-part series, and it's called Our Master Muhammad, the Messenger of Allah, His Sublime Character and Exalted Attributes by Imam Abdullah Sirajuddin al-Husani.
I do not know that. Can you give me the title again?
Our Master Muhammad, Messenger of Allah,
Okay.
His Sublime Character and Exalted Attributes. And
Have you read it?
I am in the process of reading it. It's amazing.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you for that. I'm always looking for another one.
Anybody else have a question or comment they'd like to make?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ah, yes. You're welcome. My pleasure.
Beautiful, beautiful teaching.
Thank you, beloved.
Okay, if not, I'm going to thank Hakima for a beautiful teaching. It was truly remarkable. Thank you, everybody, for being with us today.
Oh, thank you.